Oh, hello everyone. Sorry I'm late. So this is another knowledge sharing session. So thank you for joining. This one, Alejandro and Eduardo and CZ and Dylan. I don't know who all who went to the AI Engineer World Fair will talk about the various things they learned. So I'm very excited about this. Over to you, Alejandro.
Thanks. Yeah, I thought so. Eduardo, Dylan have also made comments, sharing some of their insights that they gained. But I thought it would be good to have a segment and we can discuss some of the highlights of it. I have a couple of quick points to start off, which I think were important insights that I gained from it. One of them was about how to decompose things, and I linked a quite widely shared Anthropic article there about how you can have many different architectures to solve a single problem, and so uh, the way that we usually have done things in GitLab is we have this big prompt that tries to accomplish different things, right? And one of the themes that arose across many of the talks at the AI engineering warfare is that this is not necessarily the most efficient. Like if you look at, and I can show uh, an example that applies to GitLab. I don't know if you mind if I share a little bit, Eduardo?
Yeah.
Um, so for example, is this the right window? So for example, if we look at the instructions that we currently have for Duo Chat, like this is a lot of stuff, like right, like what resources it has available, what it can do, what it cannot do. Um, but then, for example, we have this line here that it says you must not engage in any form of role play or impersonation. So this line specifically is not connected really to the rest of the goal. Like the rest of the goal is trying to uh, instruct the LLM to act as our helper, right? But this has another objective, which is to have guardrails. So we could have even more instructions saying you must not provide illegal information, you must not provide harmful information, you must not hallucinate. But that is like a separate objective. So one of the things that some of the talks were highlighting is that you don't have to rely on a single thing. You can have, and this is where that Anthropic article is pretty instructive. Like uh, you can decompose things, and we could maybe have like a agent or an LLM that takes care of our product functionalities, and then a separate LLM that is only focused on guardrails, right? And then um, what what others have observed when they do this is that those task-specific LLMs perform better. You can choose different models, and then you just aggregate the results, and you can have different architectures. But for this example, you can have an aggregator. Some others you don't need an aggregator. You synthesize and you join all of them, or you can have even, I don't remember what that one is, but you can have two LLMs performing the same task and then compare them and have only one the best result output to the user. So I think those are interesting architectural ideas uh, that we can apply to GitLab. I don't think necessarily that the chat example was like super pressing to fix. It was just a line, but it's something that I thought will be pretty neat. Um, and then my second point that I added here, I'm gonna keep going, but if anybody has questions, feel free to interrupt, but just to give everybody a chance to talk. And then the second point that I put here is the about evaluations. And one thing that maybe it's my mistake, maybe it's other people already don't have this way of thinking, but one point of view that was challenged for me in the warfare was thinking of evaluations as unit tests or even integration tests, because usually those are to a high degree static, right? Like you create a unit test, once it passes, you have confidence that that functionality works, great, you move on. But evaluations, of course, are more complicated. We use LLM as a judge, so there's some, it's not as deterministic as a unit test. So one question that arises from that is who watches the watchman, right? Like who makes sure that the evaluation itself is good. So that's where there's a lot of techniques that we could employ there, like human assessment. So we could have an LLM judge evaluate how good one of our agents is doing, but then have a human also give their evaluation and then compare the two. And then when you see a failure in the evaluation, try to go back to your dataset and see if maybe you need more challenging prompts. Go back to your evaluation prompt and see if maybe you need better instruction. And it should be like a live feedback cycle. So not only are the evaluations part of a feedback cycle where we are trying to improve our main prompts, but it's also part of it also has its own evaluation cycle where it's trying to cover more and more edge cases and have a bigger net of things that it catches. We can address what the question about the splitting LLM. So Eduardo is right. So the question that was added there was, will splitting and using multiple LLMs make us increase our cost? And it might actually be the opposite, which is I think what Eduardo is hinting at there. Like you can have, if you have more specialized LLMs, then you can use cheaper LLMs. And the difference between models and their cost is becoming increasingly large. So yeah, it might actually be a strategy to optimize costs in our setup. If that makes sense.
I mean, but let's take the example of where we're doing. So the chat prompt which you showed, right? And so we had like some guardrails in the chat prompt. So let's say guardrails is like a separate call, and then the main so you got guardrails as a separate prompt, and then you've got the actual generation as a separate prompt, and then maybe hooked on at the back of that is the format it in whatever format. So let's say there's three sort of splits. But then, first of all, it's slowed down, right? Because you first need to you can do guardrails and give me the answer in parallel, right? But then again, you're sending, especially for code, like you're sending, let's say code files with every call, probably going to hit the Anthropic token limit, which we hit anyway without any of this sort of parallelizing. Um, because we're now sending so much more data twice, right, in two separate prompts. And then also just it's going to be a performance hit because you could do guardrails and you could do some of them together, but lots of the tasks are going to be sequential, like or first generate, then format. And now, irrespective of how long the generation takes, the formatting is on top of that is going to take longer. And so, you're also like slowing down the whole process. So yeah, I just think that although like it makes sense, I'm struggling to figure out how to kind of practically use it for our use case.
Yeah, so one thing that I would say, you said like we will have to send the same data set to both LLMs, but that's not necessarily the case. So like if for do a chat, like we send the additional context, we send the open file, all this stuff. We don't need to evaluate those for the guardrails, right? Like what we need to evaluate, or I guess for some of the guardrails, but like you could have guardrails just for the user prompt, right? So you're just trying to see if the user is trying to use prompt injection in this specific use case. So you don't need to send uh, all the data. You can send relevant data. It could even come to a point where the decomposition is such that the main request has a lot of data, but some of this goes to this agent, some of this goes to these agents, and then it gets aggregated. You can use for a simpler task, you can use a non-reasoning model, which are much cheaper. I don't remember what the ratio is, but if you use a non-reasoning model compared to a reasoning model, like you can have a 5x or higher difference of cost. And also, like if we make our prompts smaller, like if we decompose the prompts and we make the prompts smaller, that's gonna also diminish the input and output token usage for the more expensive models. So that's also one of the ideas of how this could save money, is that you give less work to the most expensive model. But of course, it's possible that if you do this decomposition setup, our costs go up, and that's why like evaluations can also help here, because you can add cost as a factor there. And obviously we should try alternative approaches, but obviously we should follow the evidence, right? Follow the data. If it's more expensive, we don't use it. But it's an interesting experiment to run, I think.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right. That's a lot of time already used by me, so I'll hand it to Eduardo.
Yeah. Thanks. So for me, like just a general feeling from the conference, I quite enjoyed it. I usually, when I go to conference, I get scared of getting bombarded by vendor talks. But either I was really good at dodging them, but in general, the talks that I attended were very information rich and useful. So I attended, I think throughout the event, I attended, there were many tracks, but I attended mostly the MCP track and the evaluation track, which were the one that were most interesting for me. There were voice, a lot of them. But over this, so the MCP track, it's the de facto standard. Like MCP is the way it is now the protocol, even though it's not ready yet, even though there are things missing for it to be truly adopted. There's so momentum behind it. Um, so much momentum from companies and development on top of it that a lot of problems that were a month ago are not anymore. So with the new VS Code plugins for MCP development, uh, like the developer experience is evolving pretty fast. Like the abstractions behind it are quite good, but it's lacking things like a proper authorization, authentication. It is on the protocol, but many of the MCP servers do not implement it. So it's for now, it's just like a little bit of wishful thinking. Yeah, we have this on the documentation, but neither the clients nor servers implement it. And the other point is observability. So there was a nice talk on how to implement observability for MCP servers, but there isn't really a way of tracing. Like when you evaluate an agent or a sequence of calls, I usually pass a context, a tracking context ID or something that is a correlation ID that is passed across multiple calls. For you to do this with MCP, because the MCP can call a lot of the tools in sequence for the same answer, you have to override a private property of the MCP protocol. There is a meta property that is a private, undocumented one, and they managed to write with that. But well, there's a lot of things to be done over there. But it is like there's no point in coming up with a new protocol unless it's like an n-fold better, just because it's becoming so ubiquitous on approaches for agents that it's kind of the thing. Questions over the MCP or comments over this part? No? Cool. So the second one was on DSPy. DSPy is uh, a tool. Let me just link this over here. This where is this? This one. Uh, this pie. Mhm. So this pie is a tool for abstracting prompts. The idea is this, is that a prompt is not a good abstraction for developing AI features. Why? Because a prompt is usually um, very attached to the model that it runs on. It's very attached to the formatting that goes back a little bit with the past with what Alejandro said, with the inference mechanism, and we want this to be more about the feature you're trying to implement rather than specifics about how it should predict, how it should go over this. So this spike has a different abstraction which is called specs, and based on the specs and on evals, prompts are generated for each or optimized for each for a specific use case. On GitLab, this is very relevant, at least within my team, the custom models team, because we aim, like one of the goals is to make Duo model agnostic, so it works on any model. And our current approach is to have a prompt per model, but that's unsustainable. So using this kind of technique could help us like just have a single source spec or prompt or whatever you want to call it, and kind of like compile this so that we can support multiple models with the best prompt for each model. So that was a pretty nice talk. I don't know how much is applicable in itself or like best world, but I think some stuff we can implement over there. Um,
I'm typing a question, but my
question.
question is, so you make a spec and a prompt is generated from it. Does an LLM generate the prompt? Like, do you
Yes.
need like master LLM?
You have an optimization step that based on evaluation. So you have test cases that you want to evaluate on and a score, and then it improves over time. There are other tools like text grad is another tool that does that. So based on the evaluations that you have written, it runs the evaluation with the prompt and will takes and tries to do better at the job.
Okay.
I mean, one of the things for this is that you need your evals to be really good, I feel, in order to like start
Yes.
on this journey. If we had good evals, we probably would be able to like test some of this out. I feel like our evals are a bit lacking uh,
Yeah.
in certain areas, certainly at least like in agentic chat and like the workflow evals are based on, are based on like the SWE bench and stuff like that. And I don't think that's like that gives you a micro enough test for testing this
Hmm.
out. Yeah, so we have to think about how we could better structure our evals to be able to sort of auto prompt.
Yeah, for sure. It's any automation over over prompt optimization or anything like that will require evals. Like not only prompt optimization, just the fact of scaling models and trying to understand how we behave or how we deal with different models for our features, they require evals, right? And it's definitely lacking. I think this can be a case for improving our evals as well. I do believe this can be a case for improving evals that we have. Um, yeah, so this was the second part, and the other talk that I remember that was quite nice. It was by Zapier on how on learnings when they implemented their agentic um, features, and specifically about the evals that they had. So the first part is how to collect feedback. So first of all, instrument everything, instrument every tool call, every call for to fetch information, every LLM call, have a proper setup of instrumentation. The goal is that whenever you are trying to debug, you can replicate the exact call that led to that problem. The first is if it's a tool call, you have the inputs and the right outputs. If it is a context fetching, you have the question. If it is an LLM call, you have the input prompt, the output. Feedback, call to action. So, for example, on Duo Chat, we have after every question or something like give us feedback, or on Duo Code Review, you have the thumbs up or thumbs down. Having those at the right place can be very important because explicit feedback from customers is very hard to get. So we don't want to only rely on our evaluations, right? We want to rely on actual user uh, real data, like real usage by users and customers. But since explicit feedback is quite hard, working on in implicit feedbacks is also very useful. Implicit feedbacks is what like the user didn't actually give a feedback, but they took an action that can mean that a feedback is taken. For example, if I am on quick chat and I click the copy button over a response over the code, that can mean that the user actually liked the response. I want to paste somewhere else, for their completion. Um, they mentioned some other negative, so this is a good one, but some negative ones are if the user repeats the same question in the similar way multiple times over the chat, that's likely a negative implicit feedback because they're trying to get the user, like they're trying to get the LLM to do the right thing. Or when they start cursing at the model, that's also a good sign that thing is not working for them. Um, so this is point. And it also highly recommended building your own evals. So they called it unit evals as the first step, like the most basic, which test a specific prompt, input and output, like with many use cases. Then trajectory evals, which would be akin to end-to-end tests. So instead of testing just a specific feature, you test like calling functions, or you don't mock anything, you just try to get there. And in the end, A/B testing. So the final goal is that your evals should be correlated to A/B test. So if an A/B test saw an increase in usage, you should have always seen a better improvement on your evaluation pre-production evaluation, and the other way around. If you see an improvement, then you see an improvement on production. The problem is if you see an improvement on your eval, and then you see a decrease in production of your metrics. That means there's something really wrong with it, and you need to reevaluate your evals, which is a little bit weird. But there is also this thing that you shouldn't. This is a little bit weird if you come from like unit tests that you need to pass everything, but your eval shouldn't be 100% correct all the time. Because if it is 100% correct, it means that you cannot measure evolution of your model. So if a new model comes in, how better will it do? You need to have a specific data set, which is called a regression data set, which all things should pass. And then a second data set, which is the hard choices data set or the hard question data set that you track evolution of models over time. And they mentioned also rubric-based scoring. So instead of only having all of the talks that I attended said, don't use 0-4 scoring, use binary scoring, and have multiple judges. So all of them mention do not use 0 to 4. Do not say, okay, give a 3 if it's okay, give a 4 if it's the best. Say it works or it doesn't work, and explain why. Like, explaining why will help the both us understand what happened, but also like the 0 1. And rubric-based scoring is be more assertive on your evals. So, for example, you're testing a code eval. You can measure eval on cosine similarity, but that doesn't tell much for business goals. A business goal is your code completion should not output any markdown text, right? Any out markdown text. So an assertion eval is just a small eval that says, do not add, does this answer contain tags or not? Markdown tags or not? So this is, and build a few of this. Trade-off, increased cost because you have multiple assertions that you have to call LLM, but at the same time, you are a lot more confident on what you deliver. And then there are some talks that I want to go over this, but that's what I want. Any questions on this eval part?
I think I would just say trying also to have a paradigm shift from unit tests to evaluations on the point of 100% is not the goal. Like if I when I run RSpec and I see all green dots, that's great. If I run my evaluations and everything passed, I think should I interpret that as my evaluations are not being tough enough? Like they should be asking like more edge cases and that kind of stuff.
Definitely. I think it's if it's first of all, it's statistical. So you should have some level of failure just by randomness. So if it's doing pretty well, it might be even a bug with your system. It's not deterministic anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, I'm gonna pass my baton to Dylan.
Just conscious
Yeah.
of time. I know that we initially booked it for like 30 minutes, but if everyone's okay,
Oh,
I think we should
it's
go
what I
over.
was assuming it was an hour.
Yeah,
Uh,
I should have booked an hour. That's my bad. But
so if everyone's okay, I think we should just go on for another 15 minutes at least so that we can get
Yeah,
others to speak.
I'm okay with that.
Mine will be relatively quick. I try to pick areas that have not been talked about yet. I attended some of the voice talks and some like the retrieval and yeah, some of the retrieval tracks. But for voice, the gist that I got is that most, if not all, players in the chat space will add some sort of voice by the end of the year. And there's an issue for trying this at GitLab. If you want to leave feedback, or if you have ideas how to do this, what was used most widely at the conference was Pipecast by Daily. They were also a huge sponsor of the event, so it was fairly easy for them to have their logos and branding everywhere. I attended one of the workshops that they ran, and using their product was very simple to create a small little voice agent using text to speech. I did not try using speech to speech, but it seemed like a pretty similar implementation. Some of the challenges that people are facing in the voice space at the moment is the biggest one that I like heard about was turn detection, trying to dictate to the model when it should start speaking, when it should respond, or when it should stop recording voice. Inflection, responding like a human, not only just responding like sounding like a robot, as well as latency. Sometimes dealing with speech-to-speech models, there are some longer response times. Alongside voice, I saw a few talks on UI and how design should be handled in this agent space. But current chat-only designs will likely go quickly out of style as voice becomes more prevalent and accessible, and not just on voice, but on chat in general, going from model to model or using newer models with different responses. That can sometimes also make a chat interface not as fit for the response. So the recommendation across the board for UI was to just make it as simple as possible to allow for the fastest growth and advancement, no matter what model you use or how voice is used. But Shakar, I think you added a note.
Yeah, I had done a POC for voice quite a while ago. I don't think it got much traction in terms of like anyone thinking that this is a great idea. Yeah, I did. I mean, that's why I did the POC because I do think voice is a really great form. Um, I also had this like idea of a pair programmer, like a literal pair programmer where you just in VS Code and instead of like, you're just talking to the thing and it's talking back to you. And so yeah, let's see. See, I'm always a big one for voice.
Yeah, I'll have to watch the video. I've not seen this POC, so I'm very interested in seeing this. Okay. Let's see. For standardization of processes, one of the tracks that I watched was retrieval, and there were some really complex retrieval processes and logic about getting retrieval from certain models and building processes around this. But the last keynote that was at the top, or like one of the last keynotes, I thought was the most effective in putting it across, is that the most effective organizations will have really well-defined processes for containing the engineer's work style cycle. Um, they like pointed out that most everything is turning into well-typed and constructed prompts or instructional pieces for models to execute on a task. And the way that this is done across industries, not only just in like the software space, but across all industries, varies company by company and as well as industry by industry. And the pitch was that you could do lot of very complex retrieval, a lot of complex reasoning, but if you just start at the base with standardizing these defined processes at your company as well as like industry wide, you get really, really effective responses over time. I think GitLab is poised really well to benefit from this as well, because as we keep more information on GitLab, we effectively build a context moat, and we already have the ability to, or we are building the ability to have a knowledge graph of all of GitLab components, whether that be work items or context or wikis. And having that plus this context mode, I think would be really, really effective for Duo to make smarter responses. And then I did attend the workshops on Tuesday, along with the conference on Wednesday and Thursday. I tried in some cases to go to as many workshops as possible and just scan their QR codes. So on that link is a lot of GitHub repos for the different workshops I attended. But if the instructions or links are out of date, I'm happy to chat about them.
Dylan, and CC mentions below that we are evaluating graphs for code suggestions. Do you know if we are already exploring it for DuoChat, or would this be a new effort?
I'm pretty sure we are doing it for code suggestions, but I think that it has been POC'd for chat as well. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, we're trying to build like the graph rack capability as a generic capability that could be used across like chat and workflow and code suggestions. In fact, I think the version which you're talking about right now is probably just going to be chat and workflow and not code suggestions. I think it can be expanded to code suggestions as well, sort of because it can pick relevant context.
But if there's no more questions, CV, I'll pass you the baton.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. I attended a few sessions talking about RAG and also graph RAG in the conference. That's also related to the work that my team has been doing. I felt like the RAG is quite like an industry standard. People didn't talk RAG just for RAG, and people started talking about the graphs. I think there's some graph database like Neo4j had a big presence in the conference. I found that's quite relevant to what we are doing right now. I think we have a sub team doing either called chat with your code base or code base as the chat contact. I think that's maybe validated our vision and also roadmap. We internally invested in quite a few like different technologies that's relevant to this, like how to generate the embeddings, uh, and how do we chunk the code. Uh, and also, I think Angela also shared in some of the Slack channels about the knowledge graph progress. Uh, and maybe Edward will know more about like the models in order to be more effective. I think we are also choosing the best models for us to generate the embeddings or maybe chunk the code. I felt we are connecting the dots at the moment. That's that's about the RAG. Some other session that I attended, people talk about like multiple agent architecture and also specially tuned models. I felt like the idea was maybe they're not like one model fits all. There may be models tuned specifically for some tasks. So people can build their agent based on the specific task and have multiple agents collaborate together to achieve their goals. Uh, yeah, that's the information that I got from the conferences. I also put a link to some notes that I dumped. Any questions?
It wasn't clear to me because like graph rag is like a specific term, and this it was introduced by Microsoft. I think it's said is it a technique or is it a specific framework to implement this? I don't know.
For us, we're
Like
not.
my question,
Uh,
yeah. Go
Is a question for us? Like for us, we don't use the graph rag framework.
ahead.
Basically, the idea is this is like an age-old idea of having a knowledge graph to sort of structure your data, especially when they're like relations. And what we realized is that GitLab data, for example, is a classic knowledge graph because you've got epics relate to issues, issues relate to MRs, MRs relate to a whole bunch of other things, commits, right? Commits relate to code. Code relates to itself, like you had functions and classes, and all of them kind of relate to each other. So there's a certain very natural sort of graph relationship. And we can leverage that graph relationship to sort of query entities which are close to what you're trying to get to, right? And so that giving the AI context without having to specify it is sort of the problem that we're trying to solve here. So let's say I'm touching an issue and I've asked the AI saying, "Hey AI, can you tell me how this issue impacts other things?" And so using the graph, like it can search for sort of nearest neighbors, do like a depth first search, and find things that could be relevant, and then sorry, breadth first search, and then it finds relevant issues or MRs or epics or whatever else, and then uses that in the context to give a kind of complete picture. Um, so that's basically the idea behind. That's why we're using a knowledge graph. GraphRag itself is, I think, like a specific kind of framework that Microsoft created that uses this. But yeah, I don't think
yeah,
we're definitely not using that.
yeah.
Um,
I
Okay.
felt like the graph that I mentioned is more about the approach rather than a specific framework or technology. Uh, in the conference, I think NVIDIA also had a session, and so um, they they try to sell like their GPU assisted approach. I guess the idea is try to sell their GPUs. So they said, for example, if you can do a search, maybe based on the embeddings, or anything, then you get some similarities. For example, you pick the top n matches from there. Suppose you have the graph, you can parallelly sort the graph search uh, from your matches. Uh,
Any questions for anybody before we close? Pretty much at almost at time. But if anyone's got questions. How crowded was it?
It was okay, actually. Was it? I think it was like 2,000 people total. There were
That's not bad.
some rooms that were really, really mal badly sized. Like there were lines to get on those
Outside?
rooms. They put like some really nice talks on small rooms that got really crowded really fast. But overall, it was fine. Wasn't too bad. Um,
yeah,
Who?
they only have like very few big size rooms, so others are quite small. I think the context switch also like quite annoying if you want to jump from one to the other. So you end up like staying in line for well, so that you probably would miss the next
yeah,
talk.
The next one.
So um,
you gotta rush between two talks if you want to watch, or you sit on the same room and pray that the next one would be a nice talk.
I feel like we should do a talk for the next one. Like some of you guys
Oh, yeah,
should do a like
that's
submit a few talks for next time and see whether they get accepted.
that's another learning that I had that I forgot to share. We should be there. Like a lot of
Yeah.
the like we have a lot of learnings over the things we've built so far. That would be a nice presentation. Like our infrastructure to support self-hosted is a nice topic. How we're building agents is another good topic. Like the AI gateway in itself, like our prompt registry, is a good topic. There are plenty of talks we could bring over there for
Yeah.
future events.
Yeah, so let's do that. Let's take an action to have like two talks next event from the GitLab team.
I
Because
already
it's a great
posted as
great place to also evangelize the work we're doing. Like customers
yeah,
watch these things, right? And they get to know about products and services and what these teams are working on and how deep people are by like watching these talks. And so I think it'd be great to just do some talks and submit talks. Yeah, you just have to find a controversial enough like talk title to get in basically. Uh,
yeah.
Yeah, that was a very common technique. Like you call your talk "Rack is dead,"
yeah,
your
yeah.
talk about knowledge
MCP
graph.
is
Yes,
dead. MCP is
yes.
Long live
terrible.
in MCP or something on those
Yeah,
lines.
exactly. Yeah.
Ah,
All right. All right.
well, thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.